Fabricamos talento. Fabricamos innovación. Y, cómo no, sostenibilidad. Fabricamos una nueva economía. Y un mundo nuevo, en 3D, por supuesto. Pero sobre todo, fabricamos futuro. Y es que fabricamos empleo para más de 137.000 trabajadores. Fabricamos oportunidades globales de negocio en un espacio de más de 10 millones de metros cuadrados. Y fabricamos servicios de vanguardia y ventajas competitivas para más de 175 empresas. Consorcio de la Zona Franca. Fabricamos oportunidades para tu futuro.
Welcome to D-Factory, the factory that develops talent, technology, innovation, and of course in the heart of Barcelona. After all, D-Factory is consolidating Barcelona as a European capital of development for Industry 4.0, for digitalization, for transformation, creating 1,500 direct jobs and 5,000 indirect jobs in the city, close to the metro, the harbour and the airport. And promoted by the Consorcio de la Zona Franca de Barcelona.
It's a time of changes. Now is the time to move on. This is the time for solutions. Feel the motion. BNEW is born. BNEW, now I'm connected to you. BNEW, BNEW will do it for you. This is the time for solutions. BNEW is for you.
Buenas tardes de nuevo. Estamos ya en la recta final de este segundo día en la Barcelona New Economy Week, emitiendo desde este plató de sostenibilidad y desde este edificio, el D-Factory, organizado este evento per el Consorci de la Zona Franca de Barcelona. En el siguiente panel, al que hemos titulado Edificios preparados para el futuro, la economía circular como estrategia de eliminación de riesgos, queremos profundizar o hablar de cómo podemos construir edificios que estén preparados para el futuro. Desde este canal y durante estos 2 días hemos hablado ya de economía circular aplicada, lo escuchábamos hace un momento, al sector de la moda, pero ahora queremos centrarlo en el sector de la construcción. Los edificios también pueden dejar a un lado el sistema lineal, el de extraer, producir, usar y tirar, y apostar por ese modelo circular de reducir, reutilizar y reciclar. Y a lo largo de este panel vamos a ver de qué manera se puede hacer. Hace tiempo que se habla de edificios sostenibles, pero la coyuntura actual nos empuja a apostar definitivamente por ellos. Por un lado, tenemos la guerra de Ucrania y la dependencia de materias primas que nos llevan a preservar los materiales que ahora tenemos, los materiales existentes, con el máximo valor posible. Por otro lado, también tenemos el impacto de la industria extractiva sobre la biodiversidad, que nos reta a buscar nuevos caminos y nuevos horizontes. Saben que siempre empezamos estas presentaciones dando a conocer algún dato. El sector de la construcción representa un 36% del consumo de energía y, según el Foro Económico Mundial, el sector genera el 60% de residuos a nivel global. En paralelo, solamente el 1% de los materiales utilizados en la construcción se reutilizan. During the next hour, we will talk about buildings that are conceived, designed and built to be sustainable. Buildings that use raw materials that can be reused when their function has ended. It's like conceiving buildings as a material bank. Para esta sesión contamos con el moderador, con el señor Ignasi Cubiña, quien saludo. Buenas tardes. He's a biologist. He co-founded Eco-Intelligent Growth in 2005 and currently is the president of EIG and CEO of Grupo Construcia. He leads the development of new methodologies, tools, and metrics for the circular economy with a specific focus on urban planning, construction, and industry. Whenever you want, all yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here today. And thank you for all the people that are attending this session online. So I will start by just mentioning the title of this session. This is Future-Proof Building Circular Economy as a De-risking Strategy. Very short, there's a lot of, well, there's a lot of talk about a circular economy in the last 10 years. And I think that it's time for action now. So we are here to talk about what are the different levers that they can accelerate and speed up this transition to, towards a circular economy model with a special focus on the built environment. So this session, I will be moderating the session. I will give the ground to the different speakers. So let's just start with we have 4 speakers, 2 on-site and 2 other off-site, that I think they are ready. So everything is set. So let's start with our first speaker, which is Cécile Imbert. I will make a brief introduction. I will not read the whole bio, because we don't have too much time for that. And then I will give them some additional 2 minutes for them to explain their own story. So Cécile Imbert is the CEO of a French-based company called Fern. I mean, the reason why Cécile is here today is because he's been working in the financial sector for almost 15 years in as a mutual fund manager. So she started very early. And she's here today because she's passionate for a circular economy. She's been working on a specific project, so he's been taking action already. And she can bring us, well, a different vision, the vision from the financial sector, and how this financial sector can be instrumental to make circularity happen. So I give you the word, Cécile, for further introduction of yourself then.
Thank you, Ignasi. So first of all, I would like to thank BNEW and Ignasi from AEG for the invitation. I'm very happy to be part of this roundtable and talking about, and I like your introduction, it's now time for act. So to act, we have to act all together. So as you mentioned, I started my career in 2004 in the financial sector after holding different positions as equity fund manager in the different asset management in Paris. I left the sector in 2017. This experience clearly, which helped me to understand exactly what was the problem of the linear economy. And after analyzing a lot of business models in many sectors, and especially in real estate and construction sector, I realized that it was time to create new solutions towards circular economy. So on this awareness, I founded my company, so Fern, in 2018. The company is based in Paris, and I am the CEO. And Fern aims to contribute to the transformation of the construction sector by providing circular building solutions, and more specifically on the renovation market.
Thank you, Cécile. So we're coming from someone who's relatively new in the business to someone who's been working in sustainability and well, building management for almost more than 10 years. So our next speaker is online, is Ms. Josefina Lindblom. Josefina is working at the European Commission for DG Environment Management and Consumption. Josefina, thank you very much for joining us here today. One additional remark additional comment on Josefina is one of the reasons why she's here today is because she's been instrumental on developing or helping to develop well, the levels framework in for the built environment. So we would like to learn more about this in coming minutes. So it's your turn now, Josefina. All yours.
Muchísimas gracias. Thanks a lot. Yes, indeed, working for DG Environment in the European Commission. And I'm not, I don't have an academic background in buildings. I am actually a chemical engineer, but I have sort of managed this anyway. So it's true that for more than 10 years now, I've been working on sustainable buildings, that kind of work in the Commission, which also, as you said, to a large extent, meant that I was managing the development of levels, which is a tool to a framework of indicators to assess and report on sustainability performance of buildings. We developed this because we felt that as policymakers, we wanted to be able to drive, incentivize sustainability in buildings. But when we did it, it was hard to actually make sure that we were targeting the right things. There was no common definition of what a sustainable building was. Hence, we did this work. Now we have it since 2020. While Levels is a voluntary tool which anyone can use on their building project, we are also, and that's what I wanted to come to, in the last couple of years, we have worked on using Levels as a basis to bring in circularity and life cycle thinking into different policies and even legislation. So this is what I am busy with for most of my time. We are looking at how we can use Levels as a tool, as a basis to underpin these kinds of thinking in policies as well. I also work to develop a roadmap together with other colleagues, a roadmap for the reduction of whole life carbon of buildings up to 2050. So it's a lot of policy work in relation to sustainability of buildings for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Josefina. So we have a biologist, financial expert, now chemical engineering. Now we give the word to Thomas van Oppens, who is online. Thomas is Deputy Mayor for Material Management at the stad of Leuven. Well, he wants to be presented as a material manager deputy, rather than a resource manager or waste manager, which is something I highly appreciate, by the way. So the word is yours, the floor is yours, Thomas. Can you bring us some additional information?
Gracias, Ignasi. So yes, I'm Thomas van Oppens, and I'm here myself. Sorry, give me a second. Yeah, so my name is Thomas van Oppens, and I'm the Deputy Mayor for Material Management, as we say. So I try to bring a lot of things to the local level and get things done in real terms in the city of Leuven, which was the capital of innovation of European capital of innovation last year. And we try to find the most innovative ways to be able to reuse materials as much as possible, to prevent waste from appearing, and to see all forms of waste actually as materials that can be used, reused, and in the last case, reduced, to maximize our resources that we have and minimize our waste that we have. But I will be talking a lot more about that in this conference.
Thank you, Thomas. So we will finish with Cástor González. Cástor is the CEO of Circular Capital. Circular Capital is a new instrument that has been built on purpose to facilitate the implementation of circular economy strategies at different levels, from the real estate to the built environment and the industry, which is supporting the making of buildings and building systems. So tell us about your goals and expectations, Cástor.
Thank you very much, Ignasi, and thank you to all the streaming attendees that are willing to support sustainability and circularity. My brief bio was born in 2008 as an industrial engineer, and then I've been more than 8 years between management consulting and investment management in clean tech, and now I decided to join the Circular Revolution team in Europe, which is hand by hand with Grupo Construcción, and I think that let's go.
Okay. So thank you all. Now we start a session. So we will be distributing, well, we will asking 5 questions to different people. So we will not have everyone asking the same questions. So we have made a kind of a little bit of a selection. So let's start with the first question. So circular built environment is hype, is a reality, or is a must-have strategy? If built environment is part of the problem, do you think circular built environment is part of the solution, or the whole solution of what kind of solution it can bring to the society? So let's start with Cécile. Cécile, you have 2 minutes for that. Let's try to be tight on schedule.
Okay, I will try.
Sorry for that.
No problem, I'm going to try.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so maybe before answering what is the solution provided by the circular economy, maybe just a little introduction, what is the problem that we are actually facing. We are actually facing a multifactorial crisis that we have to, unfortunately, fix. We have climate change, we have energy and raw material scarcity. We have the problem also of waste, and we all know that the built environment, it clearly has a huge impact on all these topics. So definitely circular built environment is the answer. Why? Because it's the approach to decouple resource use to GDP from the GDP growth. And now how circular built environment address the many problems that we have to fix, so emission, CO2 emission, waste, and resource scarcity. So if we start by the CO2 emission, we all know right now in the market fix what we call the operational emission, okay, due to electricity, heating, and cooling consumption. Where it's more difficult to find a solution to address, and it's exactly what Leuven's doing, and also EEG with lean to cradle methodology. It's to fix what we call embodied carbon. And the embodied carbon, it's clearly the emission generated during the whole life cycle of a building and its materials. And it's clearly the value added by the circular built environment. It's the ability to assess and evaluate this asset, CO2 emission, and to act to reduce them. The second thing that we have to manage with circularity is the question of resource scarcity. So we all know that we have actually a huge problem, and it's also a reason of the inflation on raw materials, is how to find solution to reduce the consumption of materials in the industry. So one of the strategies that was clearly developed in the recent years was the recycling. But unfortunately, it's an incomplete answer, because we all know that it's not fixing the problem of the depletion of raw materials, but also the overall emission generate during the process. So we have to act on solutions that help to, how I can say, to put the material in a long use.
Longer use.
Yes, and we have some solutions that we start to develop on the French market, by example. We talk about reuse materials or upcycling material, but it's clearly not really well developed in the market. I'm sorry.
No. I think now that you are talking about material management and well, the approach at the local level, you know, you can probably, move to Thomas, you know.
I'm sorry.
Because I think it's his field of expertise. Thank you, Cécile, by the way. Yeah? And by the way, highly appreciate that. You have this approach coming from the financial world. So this is very refreshing. Thomas, you just introduced yourself that you are, you are dealing with reality at the local level. So, let us know what is your vision about it, and how you will address these questions and challenges. Thomas, are you with us?
Yes, yeah, I have a thing.
What?
Creo que tenemos un problema para escuchar a Thomas, y en todo caso tendremos que dar paso a los ponentes que tenemos aquí en la mesa.
Okay. No, Thomas is back. Thomas is back. Okay, Thomas.
Ya está, todo solucionado.
Okay. Las cosas del directe.
So maybe you want to continue, no?
Oh, sorry. Thomas, your turn now. Okay, ask you the question again. Okay. Well, the thing is, the same question. Circular built environment, high reality or must-have. If built environment is part of the problem, do you think that circular economies or circular construction economy is part of the solution or the whole solution? What do you think from a local level perspective?
Well, we absolutely think that the circular economy is part of the solution of the built environment. And it's not just a hype, it's a must-have. I think today we find ourselves in what we can observe as some sort of perfect storm. I mean, climate change is happening all around us, and it's becoming more and more serious. Also, we're taking it more serious from a European level to a local level. Everybody is taking climate change more serious, and we know that a big part of our CO2 production stems from the building of buildings, amongst others. Next, there is like a big crisis going on in terms of materials, where due to the war in Ukraine, there is a lack of new materials, which is, of course, raising prices. But and at the same time, we see that people are more ready and more willing to look for sustainable alternatives. So these three things are happening all at once in a way. And I think this is the perfect opportunity for everybody, not only just as a local level, but for new companies, new economy to rise from these problems and to offer some solutions. Just to give a quick example, here in Leuven, we have what we call the material bank. And so the idea was that, okay, we have some materials that need to be disposed of, but we see that we can reuse them. They can be reused. And we need to find people who are willing to pay for it to reuse them. So because my idea was, I'm an economist, that's my background, and I say, okay, well, this is all very good and everything, but if we want to really make this work, then this has to be able to make money of its own, actually, if you want to have a new economy from happening. And so we made a 5-year plan saying, okay, we start in 2020, and in 2025, this thing will start making a profit, or at least may break even. We're 2 years later, and we're already break even. Due to this perfect storm that is occurring, there are a lot of people willing to take in these materials, to use them, to reuse them. People who say, okay, my house does not need to have doors that are all the same. And they're also willing to pay for things that have already been used, because we can also say that there's some sort of charm even in there, in that story. But also, of course, because of the price of materials rising due to the war, this is becoming a very sustainable business model. And due to that fact, we can also become more sustainable ourselves by reducing our CO2 emissions. So this thing that's going on is a perfect storm in which I think we as a society need to take the opportunity to get going and get things done and start maximizing the reuse of our materials.
Thank you, Thomas. So turns, Josefina. I mean, Thomas is talking about a perfect storm. So, I mean, how do you see, and with your experience in the field, I mean, how do you see circular economy tackling or addressing this perfect storm?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what has already been said, and I think we heard most of it, but there was a part which was missing. Indeed, I think circular economy is, or let's say like this, I indeed think that buildings, the built environment, is definitely part of the problem. I mean, obviously we need the function of buildings, but the way we are doing it up till now is part of the problem. I actually wanted to take one step back, if that's okay, and come back to some figures, because already in the very introduction here, before you got the word, there were some numbers being mentioned. I would actually like to say that the 36% of our total carbon emissions being sort of coming from the building sector, that is only looking at the operation of buildings, so heating and cooling, etc. But if we look at the full life cycle of a building, so if that means if we look at the extraction of materials, the manufacturing of products, the construction itself, of course, and end of life, all of this comes also with carbon emissions, right? Then we are much higher up. So it's really an important sector. And we also, when it comes to the consumption of materials, the waste that we are generating, and the carbon emissions that are the results. But we also know, thankfully, that there are a lot of things that we can do without. I mean, to make this climate neutral, it's not gonna be easy. Let's put it like this. But there are certain things that we can do quite easily, actually, which already make a lot of difference, a big change. I would like to say that circularity is an important part of the solution, because that's also one of the questions that we're looking at here, but it's not the only one, I would say. I think that first of all, we need to look at several things at the same time. That can always be tricky. But a key thing, I think, is sufficiency. So that is really about what square meters do we need to build, and how can we use those square meters that we have more efficiently. Yeah. It is not about, everyone having extremely small homes, etc. But we have so many square meters already, which we are not using effectively, either not using them at all or not using them effectively over the day, of the course of the day, or things like that. Yeah. So there are a lot of things that we should look at. So sufficiency, renovation instead of demolishing and building new, if we can renovate, and then of course having circularity in mind, because circularity is not just something that we apply for new buildings but also for renovation, is a key factor. Circularity, indeed. And what does that actually mean apart from reuse and recycle, which we all understand intuitively? It's about extending the lifetime of the building, of elements in the building and the building, because if we can keep a building in its function for longer, well, then we don't need to build new, right? It is about having flexible buildings and adaptable buildings so that we can use them for different needs. And it is, of course, for designing our buildings for assembly and disassembly, and then we come into this point of reuse and recycle. So there are lots of things to think about, and this reuse and recycle is a part of it, a very important part, but it is not the only one. So I think, circularity in the context of many other things that we need to look at, for sure. And I particularly want to stress sufficiency in this context.
Okay, thank you, Josefina. By the way, we need to speed up a little bit because otherwise we will not make it. So let's try to make answers a little bit more, a little bit shorter. Let's stay with you, Josefina, because then it also the flow is easier. So the next question is, you were talking about sufficiency, and you also, in your introduction, you were talking about a different, building a common language that defines sustainability in the right way. So, one of the new frameworks, probably the latest one, is the levels framework. And what the levels, what is levels meant for, and what is the relationship with the EU taxonomy framework?
Yeah.
And whether we have, the right framework at the right time for the right purpose.
Exactly. Yeah, that I can answer quite quickly, I think. Taxonomy is then linked to the Sustainable Finance Initiative, right? Which is a way for the Commission to define and how you define if an investment is sustainable or not, which can be good to know for different reasons and different contexts. So that's why we are developing this taxonomy for different kinds of sectors, different kinds of production. For buildings, as for the other product groups or industries, we're doing this in steps. Last year, we adopted a so-called delegated act, a piece of legislation, which sets out the different kinds of criteria for different products then, including building, when it comes to or in relation to climate change. So that piece of legislation is already there. And indeed, when we did that, we were using the levels indicator on whole life carbon. So looking at the carbon emissions over the full life cycle, because it has a direct link to climate change, of course. And we could incorporate this kind of thinking because we had the levels indicator in this area. So that was very useful. This year, we take the second step and we do a new piece of legislation, which then not only looks at climate change, but at circularity. So the topic of what we are discussing today. So that means that, again, buildings come up and we can then use other or include more indicators from levels, because levels takes a very strong focus on circularity. And as we have them, of course, we are using them here as well. So there is a direct link between the taxonomy and levels. In fact, levels is used to underpin circularity and life cycle thinking in the taxonomy.
Mm-hmm. Great. So let's move to Cécile. Cécile has made the opposite journey. You know, she comes from the financial world, now is more into the, let's say, sustainable industrial world. And then the world is back to her roof now, because when you talk about levels and the EU taxonomy, you talk about sustainability or eligibility for sustainable buildings and sustainable systems. So what do you think about this, using levels and the EU taxonomy as an enabler for, funding the right projects?
Well, for me, it's important today to share a feedback for projects that we carry out with your team, Ignasi, AG, on renovations that we've made both with levels and also lean to cradle methodology that you develop AG for a French insurance company, and it was the renovation of their headquarters. And for us, Leuven was a very important tool and helped a lot in terms of execution of the project. Because to ensure a good result and a complete transformation, that it's key for the financial sector. And this company, it's an insurance company. So they wanted to have a good execution for sure for the renovation project. But what they are, sorry to use that word, but what they are buying also data, and the good data, the reliable data, to get the good reporting. And clearly the fact that Leuven is the European Commission tool used inside the taxonomy, it's clearly really important for investors to get that framework, because, as I said, it ensures proper execution and reliable result. The second thing for me is that you put all your stakeholders of the project in the same methodology with a common language. So it's in terms of execution, it's very helpful tool, because everybody has the same level of information and you are sure that you are following this framework. And for us, in terms of project management, it was clearly a very helpful tool. The second thing now, I think for the European Commission, Leuven is also a good tool, a monitoring tool, if I can say, to be ensured that the financial flow are allocated in the right project. And I think it's also important for the policymaker to be sure that all the sector is moving in the right direction. And finally, for me, if I have just one thing that I could give as a feedback also, I just regret that it's only a volunteer approach. We have this discussion with Ignasi, and I think if we want to move forward and faster, because it's now that we have to act, I think that the sector, and I talk about my French point of view, the market, and even if you have big institutional insurance company, when we start the project with this insurance company, we said, do you know levels? No, we don't. So that's why I'm sure, and I'm very happy to be with Josefina and to have also your point of view, but I regret that it's not mandatory, if I can say it like that, mandatory tool, because it's the only way that the sector is really focused on the good practice. That's my point of view.
Good. And thank you for your experience in the French market.
Yeah, but also, no, maybe it's important, and I don't want to miss that, to give some key figure of the project, because it's important. No, we don't have time.
I don't think we have time, to be honest.
I'm sorry. That
okay,
was
no
too
problem.
long.
you can keep it for the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so let's jump to the next one. I mean, we are in a Barcelona New Business meeting type of arena, you know. So let's talk about new business. And let's start with Cástor, because you've been quiet for quite some minutes now, you know.
Thank you, Ignasi. Well, for me, this question is key, no? Because how we are going to implement that new paradigm of circular economy? For me, it's both. We have to create new business models, and we have to adapt the way in which we do business now. So, standing at that point, for me, we have to start to introduce that new business models along this new flow, which is circular, and that must warrant that what we were looking from a financial perspective in terms of, for example, terminal value, we need to create that new business models that change this terminal value to a captured or retained value. Then we have to adapt the ways in which we create revenues from the current state of the art of the businesses, and as well as we have to shift the way in which the OPEX is now treated. How to let's say it in that way, no? So the question is that the right approach? For me, it is.
It is.
For sure. There is no alternative.
Okay, thank you. So we have two more questions. The next one, we'll make it a little bit shorter, so we will have 3 people answering this question. So let's talk about climate change mitigation. I mean, it was just mentioned that this is the first chapter being addressed by the EU taxonomy. So, and well, the whole life cycle of carbon has been mentioned several times already. And what is operational carbon versus embodied carbon, which is one of the critical things to be addressed. The question is, if we want to achieve the decarbonization goals, that they are very ambitious, by the way, in a very short-term period, so we need a deep change in the industry, and from raw materials to recirculation. We look at the whole life cycle of a product, for instance. We're talking from, those they are familiar with that, from all different stages, you know, from the raw material extraction to the what we call the next use of materials and products. And Levels is mainly focused on that. That's why also Levels is putting a lot of emphasis on making circularity happen. The question is, do you think that the market is ready for that? Do you think that, how we can manage the whole supply chain to make this decarbonization pathway happening and really effective in a timely manner? So we can start with Thomas. Thomas, with your experience at the local level, you know, how you deal with things like upstream, for instance, supply chain management?
That's a very interesting question, Ignasi. Only last week I sat together with everyone from the chain, meaning architects, builders, big companies who manage large properties, and everyone said, like, yeah, we really want this, but we don't know how to start. We just don't know. And what happened is that they say, okay, yeah, we have some building sites, because this is about reusing materials, right? And I'm not going to talk about the supply chain far away, but like right here, right now, there are buildings being broken down who have materials that can be used. There are people putting down buildings that could be even more circular, because we might make those buildings in a way that we can reuse those building blocks on a different building. So there are many possibilities, and they just don't know where to start. And so there's an important role, I think, for example, Levels is very important to us, because as a local government, we are starting to put down, well, laws is not the right word, but we're starting to put down rules. We're saying, if you want to start a big project in our city, we're going to put some things in place, namely the buildings that you break down. You need to see what's in there. You need to show that you maximize the reusing of the things that are in there, and the buildings that you built we want you to reuse as many materials for this building as possible. So we're making rules in both ways. We want to make those rules. We really want to do that, but that needs a framework. That's why levels is important, but there also needs to be an economy surrounding that. If there are no suppliers for reusable materials, then we can obligate anything we want, but then the result will just be that we won't have any buildings left, or no buildings will be built anymore. So we are trying to do both ways, and we notice that in every market, we need to try to match supply towards demand. So what we are trying to do now is to sit together with the big players in our city, see what projects are coming up in the coming decade, actually, and see, okay, where can we match needs and availability of certain objects. And of course, with some implications towards pricing, towards stocking, towards keeping materials in a certain place. That's a role the city can play, in our opinion, where we try to make this matching platform happen a little bit. But with the idea of eventually now it's an opportunity for them to participate, but in the future it will be an obligation to participate. So yeah, of course, this new economy, it will not arise by itself, and we try to give a little push by using the right rules for them.
Good. I think this one is also for you, Josefina. We are taking advantage of your presence and your expertise on levels and whole life cycle assessment. So you were mentioning several times that I mean, levels is a right framework to look at the whole life cycle of buildings, building components, elements, materials, products, everything which is within the built environment. So how do you, I mean, what is your perception about levels dealing with the supply chain management and the material scarcity in general?
Yeah, now of course levels is, as you said, it's, or we've been saying, it's a framework with indicators, but it is there to give a structure, because I think very many people, just like Thomas said, there is the willingness, but it's just a lot of uncertainties of how to go about. And of course levels does not pretend to give all the answers to solve all those questions, but indeed it is there to give some kind of structure. It provides a clear methodology, and it sets out some kind of a step-by-step approach. And I think importantly also, it doesn't just throw a number of indicators at you, which you need to deal with in a quantitative manner straight away. But there is this first level of levels where you look at the different kinds of indicators in a qualitative way. And that level is more there to guide the conversation in the beginning of a project regarding what are the objectives, what is it that we want to achieve, what can we look at, and then levels gives questions that you should think about when you go through this process. So I think already if you start doing that, even if you don't then later on go on to work with indicators in a quantitative way, it's already a good start. And it doesn't mean that you cannot then later on in another project take the next step. But it is there to sort of guide you. And I think what many people say who use levels is that it is a great tool to understand how different actors need to work together. It sort of sets out that in a very clear and structured way. Again, I understand that there are still challenges to overcome, but I think it's a step forward in that direction. I also want to stress that we have now different tools which help a user further. So we have the e-learning, we have a calculation tool, etc. Again, it's not solving all the questions that you have, but I think it takes the user in the hand a bit and can guide towards increased knowledge and understanding of how to go about. I think it's the way I see it is that a lot of things have changed in the value chain, in the market in the last, let's say, 10 years, and I'm sure it has changed even more if you look 20 years back. But when we started to work on this 10 years ago, this notion of circularity and life cycle thinking in the building sector, we were really the odd people, and now it is really a topic that everyone, or almost everyone, keeps on coming back to. So I'm not saying therefore that everyone is ready to change tomorrow, but I think there is a growing understanding of it, and there is the willingness to start the change, and that I think is really important.
Thank you. So we're running out of time. We have time for one question and two answers. That was, I mean, we're talking about a building level, so let's talk also about a higher system, which is the city level. So this question is for you, Thomas. I mean, how do you think the cities, they can manage challenges of circularity and digital transformation of the built environment and the built industry. And what implications are in order to, we also know that the EU, the EU community, there is a social agenda which is pretty strong, and the idea in the EU taxonomy is not to leave anyone behind. So what the implications are for people?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's very important to leave no one behind. And actually by maximizing reusing materials, we're actually lowering the price of materials and effectively making it more possible for more people to live in better sustainable buildings, etc. But of course, the circular economy, it won't happen by its own. And so what we're doing now through digitalization is, well, just like we always say, it's Tinder for materials. So just like people find each other on Tinder, we try to make sure that people and builders, etc., that they find the right materials by looking through a guide and saying, okay, this is what I need, this is what I want, and by matching output and input. And it really works. I mean, last year we were able to recuperate 40 tons, and I know in this industry that's not a lot, but we were able to recuperate 40 tons of materials that would have otherwise gone to waste that are now reused. This year we're going for 60 tons, and we're getting there. So at this rate, raising the bar 50% each year, we will really be able to reduce a lot of waste, but also to implement a lot of old materials into new buildings. And that's just very, very, very sustainable. But I think that what we have now is a start, and we need to get the big players involved so that we can go from 40 ton to 40 million ton, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. So I think we are definitely running out of time. So we'll just make a quick wrap up. Well, I think there are a lot of things that they need to be discussed further on. But I think, three main ideas or three main messages. First of all, I think circular economy and circular built environment is not a hype. It's a must-to-have, and it's a reality already, first thing. Second thing is that this is something that needs effort, needs new tools, needs new approaches, you know, and it needs the participation of everyone. So circular economy is nothing that will happen just by policy making or by material scarcity. We need the whole implication of the society. And the third thing is that when we talk about environmental impact or social impact, especially when we talk about things like climate change and how to address climate change, I think that decarbonization and circular economy, they are two sides of the same coin. I mean, we need a circular economy model to make climate change mitigation and decarbonization happening, not only within the European region, but going beyond our own region. So thank you very much. Sorry, guys, we didn't have more time, and thank you.
Pues esto ha sido todo. I'm sorry, but the time is up. Ha hecho ya un fantástico resumen el moderador Ignasi Cubiña, y por nuestra parte solo agradecerles que hayan sintonizado con el canal de sostenibilidad, y les esperamos mañana puntualmente a partir de las 10 en las nuevas sesiones de ya el tercer día de la Barcelona New Economy Week.
Fabricamos talento, fabricamos innovación y, cómo no, sostenibilidad. Fabricamos una nueva economía y un mundo nuevo.